Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Fable Joey and I am here with a video that I have been waiting to make for a very long time, and that is my story with Fire Emblem, the video game series. It is my second favorite video game franchise of all time, and I am so excited that I get to come here and tell you guys my story with it. This is one of my many Fire Emblem shirts, and let's get right into this, because my story with Fire Emblem, I feel, is a bit different than other people's. And whether you were introduced to Fire Emblem with Awakening, which is known for saving the franchise, or you've known it for a long time, I love Fire Emblem fans. They've always been very fun to talk to, whether they like the new installments or they don't like the new installments. They're more calm than other people, and there are a lot of great Fire Emblem YouTubers out there. I just really love the Fire Emblem community, and I just wanted to tell my story with the series, why I love it so much, and how I was introduced to it. So let's get started. Like I said before, a lot of people were introduced to the series, to Fire Emblem, with Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS, which is a fantastic game, and if you've never played a Fire Emblem game before, I recommend that maybe being your first one, or some other games that I'll touch on later. But I was actually introduced to the Fire Emblem series way before Awakening came out, and personally I think it's really cool for Fire Emblem fans to take a step back and look at the fan base and the franchise before Awakening happened. I was introduced to Fire Emblem when I was about 6 or 7 years old. My older brother had found the Fire Emblem cartridge, the first Fire Emblem game that was brought to the West. I've always just called it Fire Emblem, but I think the official name is Fire Emblem Blazing Blade, and I instantly fell in love with this game from the second I started playing it. And that was my introduction to the Fire Emblem series, which is just continued for my whole entire life, and I've absolutely loved the series, and I've grown to love it even more over the years. So my first introduction was when I was 6 or 7 with that game, and honestly, I couldn't have had a better introduction to the series. That game, for a young kid at least, was very difficult for me. I remember just going through it, and I'm one of the people who, even if a character dies, and even if I don't care about that character, I don't use them, I'll restart the chapter because I just feel bad that I let them die. That's just kind of how I play. It's probably stupid for a lot of people, but with the permadeath feature, there was no way to turn that off. For us old school Fire Emblem fans, that was what made us love Fire Emblem, at least a lot of us, is that it's that emotional attachment that you have with the character when they die, and sometimes when you have to make sacrifices, like it's your 50th time playing a boat chapter, one of the ones where you're on the sea and the map is a boat, in one of the GBA titles, and you've played it 50 times and someone dies and you just don't want to go back for them. It is crushing, and that's one of the reasons why I love Fire Emblem, because of the permadeath feature. But yeah, my introduction to those GBA games was just something different, because I was not used to games like that. I had never played a JRPG before. I had never played a game where if your character dies, they die forever. And honestly, it was just so intriguing, and the day that I finally grew up and I was able to play through the whole game and beat the whole game was just, it was very bittersweet, because it had taken me so long, and to look back through my childhood years playing that game, it was just a really great memory for me, and being able to finally beat that game was like a spiritual experience, because it had taken me so long, and to finally beat that game, I think it is my favorite Fire Emblem game in the franchise. And I feel like a lot of people really love that game because of nostalgia, but it isn't just nostalgia, it still holds up today. And like I said, if you've never played a Fire Emblem game, you could go to Awakening, which is what a lot of people started with, or you could go back and play some of the GBA titles, like Sacred Stones, or Blazing Sword, or Binding Blade. Those are the 3 GBA titles, and I love all 3 of them, even though one of them, I'm talking about you, Binding Blade, is pretty frustrating. I still love those installments, and I think that they're a great introduction to the series. But anyway, I was introduced there, and then me and my brother, I think, bought Sacred Stones for the GBA for like $14 off of eBay one time, and it was just like so cool seeing it come in the mail. I just remember it was just like the worst GBA cartridge of all time. Like anytime we put it in, it would like corrode our Game Boys that we were playing it on, or whether we were playing a DS. Sometimes it would just turn off randomly and you turn it back on and all your save data was gone. So we had a lot of fun with Sacred Stones, but it was just cool to have another Fire Emblem game. And I remember being a fan as a younger kid, watching the trailers for Awakening, being so excited, talking about who would maybe be the person that I would choose to marry in those games, because that was the first that mechanic was coming in, and I just remember a debate between me and my cousins over who was going to marry Lucina for the first time. I mean, I married her the 3 times that I've played the game, so apparently I'm pretty attached. But I just remember being a fan, watching the trailers. I didn't even have a 3DS yet, and I was still so excited for the day that I'd be able to play Fire Emblem Awakening. And I'm so thankful for Awakening. Whether you like it or hate it, you have to acknowledge that it's the reason that we're getting Fire Emblem titles today. It saved the franchise, and I couldn't be more thankful for it for doing that. I love Fire Emblem, so obviously it would have been so sad to have ended at Awakening, although it would have been a great last installment. I am so happy that we have the opportunity to get Fire Emblem games, and I'm so happy that in 3 days, a new Fire Emblem installment comes out, and it's almost looking like it has the potential to be the best Fire Emblem game that we have ever had. So aside from my story and kind of how I started with those GBA games, and I've been following it ever since into the 3DS era, which a lot of Fire Emblem fans are split here because of the way that Awakening did some mechanics. A lot of old school Fire Emblem fans did not like the changes, and me personally, I can see why they didn't like the changes, but I do think that some of them were needed for Fire Emblem to move on into a new age. There are some mechanics that maybe should have been left behind, and there are new ones that have come up that I absolutely loved and had a great time with. And whether or not you like the 3DS games, personally, for the people who did like the 3DS games, 3DS was probably the best system for Fire Emblem games. We had Fire Emblem Awakening, and then after we had the Fate series, Birthright, Conquest, and Revelation. That's 3 Fire Emblem games, even more. And then you have Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia, which is a remake of Gaiden, and that game is just on a whole nother level. I absolutely love the 3DS because of the installments that were brought from the Fire Emblem franchise onto the console. And since it has become my favorite console, for other reasons, of course, if you can really call it a console, I know it's a handheld system, but Fire Emblem has always been a huge part of, like, my life, and those 3DS games just made me love the series. Whether you love them or hate them, I know that a lot of people really dislike the Fate series, and there are parts of it that I really dislike, but I ended up having a great time with them, and I've had a great time with every Fire Emblem game that I've played, and I'm so excited that I've kept with the series for so long, especially because Three Houses just looks fantastic. And just a little disclaimer, I'm choosing the Blue Lions, okay? No one can change my mind. Claude's a beast, Edelgard's pretty cool, but I'm set on the Blue Lions, and I'm not changing my mind. That's all I have to say about that. But there is one thing that I did want to touch on. A lot of people's favorite Fire Emblem games who have been fans other than just the 3DS series are Fire Emblem Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn on the GameCube and Wii. And the sad thing about my story with Fire Emblem is that I've never got to play those 2 games. I got to play the first 10 chapters of Path of Radiance when my friend let me borrow his copy of the game, but I ended up keeping it for way too long, and he wanted it back, which I definitely understand now because it was just taking me too long. I had so much going on at the time that I never really got to play through the game, and ever since, many of you know the struggle of trying to get Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn. Path of Radiance goes for about $300 on most places. On Amazon, I think it might be like $400, and it is just so hard to get a hold of this game. So people say emulation. Personally, I suck at emulating things. I've tried multiple times on different laptops, and whenever I do get a ROM for Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, the audio is always awful, and it's so slow, and when I play those games for the first time, or when I beat those games for the first time, I'd like to have it as a great experience, and emulating those games just doesn't seem like it could be a great experience. I'm sure that a lot of people have loved those games through the emulation, but it just really isn't for me, and it's honestly kind of heartbreaking because those games are supposed to be some of the best installments in the series. I know that Radiant Dawn is a lot of people's favorite Fire Emblem game of all time, so I'd really like to play that in the future. I think that one goes for about $90, so I would pick it up, but I've never played Path of Radiance, or I've never beat Path of Radiance, and Radiant Dawn is the sequel to that, so I thought I'd brush up on those just in case people were like, oh, why didn't you talk about that? It's because I haven't got the chance to beat them, and I would really love to. So if I come across Path of Radiance or Radiant Dawn someday, I'll be sure to make a video about that. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if I ever do, I'll let you guys know. Anyway, I've loved the Fire Emblem series, so I was going to talk about some of the reasons why I love the series so much. And one of the reasons you've been hearing through this whole video is Fire Emblem's music. I personally believe that the music in Fire Emblem games is some of the best music in any video games ever. Whether it be those amazing recruitment themes, which we're listening to right now, or battle maps, or for some reason, I just feel like the whole musical budget was spent on the last level in Fire Emblem games. Some of those last levels have the most beautiful scores I've ever heard, and it's just insane. I always cannot wait for that last level, obviously because it's going to end the game, but also because of the music that comes with those final chapters. I swear, the music in these games is it's on another level. Even if you don't like the games, I encourage you to go listen to a couple soundtracks. My favorite soundtracks, Echo's soundtrack was incredible. The orchestra on that works so hard. There's so many beautiful tracks. I think everyone would really like Echo's soundtrack if they listen to it. Fire Emblem Awakening had a great soundtrack. I love the GBA game soundtrack. All of them are good. Go look up a Fire Emblem music compilation. Just do it. They're amazing. So the music, that's a huge part. And the story. The story has become one of the most controversial elements in Fire Emblem games of recent years. Whether you love the 3DS game stories or you hate them, it's still something that needs to be acknowledged. A lot of people think that the new 3DS installments, aside from Echoes, I hear mostly positive things from other people about the stories, but they really hate the way that the main character is like customizable because the stories aren't as strong. And I do agree with that to some point. That's not to say that those games aren't enjoyable, but there are games like Fire Emblem Blazing Sword where you have protagonists like Hector and Eli Wood, people pronounce it differently, and Lynn, where you're attached to those characters more and the story is more fleshed out than a game where Corrin, your customizable character, is the main protagonist. Because it's just kind of a shallow protagonist, it's kind of hard to get yourself attached to him. I definitely understand the criticisms, but I still really do enjoy those games personally because of other characters driving the story forward and because I enjoyed the gameplay. So that's kind of my take on it, but personally, Fire Emblem has always just been an escape for me. It's my second favorite game franchise, so obviously I love it. I've loved every Fire Emblem installment that I've played, even the games that I can acknowledge are not that good. Games like Birthright, I still ended up having a fun time with that game. Yes, the maps are repetitive. Yes, the characters aren't the greatest. The story isn't the strongest, but I still had a fun time playing through. And that's my experience with all of the Fire Emblem games. And I hope it's the same thing with Three Houses. Honestly, in my opinion, this looks like it could be the best Fire Emblem installment that we've ever had. Some people might disagree with that, some people might not like the changes, but I'm just excited for Fire Emblem to return to home consoles. Although I loved it on the 3DS, I could always see the potential in making another home console Fire Emblem game, and now that we're finally getting it, I couldn't be more excited. And I'd really like to hear your guys' stories below on how you got into Fire Emblem, or what's your favorite Fire Emblem game, or your favorite music track from the game, or if you've never played Fire Emblem, are you going to pick up Three Houses, or does it not interest you at all? Those are some things that I want to hear down in the comments, but honestly, my big message for this was I'm excited to be a Fire Emblem fan right now. I love the fan base, and I cannot wait for Three Houses. My story with Fire Emblem started when I was a little kid, playing that game on the Game Boy Advance, falling in love instantly with the music and the characters and the atmosphere and the gameplay. It was my first JRPG that I've ever played. The permadeath scared me as a younger kid, still does sometimes, but I will always play those games from now on. I think I only played 2 installments with the casual on, but to be fair, I was pretty young and I didn't really care. I just wanted to play it for the story, but that's something that I've grown to love about Fire Emblem, that permadeath. And it's been implemented in other game franchises, but I feel like Fire Emblem was the first real series to kind of implement it and kind of make it more emotional than other games. So I guess the main message of this video is I've been a Fire Emblem fan for most of my life now. I love the series to death. It's my second favorite game series ever, like I've said many times before. I love everything about it, and I cannot wait for future installments, especially Path of Radiance, because that game just looks amazing. I can't wait to play it. And Three Houses, it comes on Friday. I don't know if I'm gonna do an unboxing or if I'm like, once Three Houses comes out, my life is gone. I don't think I'd love to upload some videos on the channel, but I'm honestly just going to be playing it throughout the rest of my summer and just onwards. And I'm so excited for that game. Comment down below your favorite Fire Emblem game or your story with Fire Emblem, how you got into the series, because I'd love to hear it and I will read through them. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys coming to see my story with Fire Emblem, how I got introduced to the series, why I love the series so much, why I'm excited for future installments, and all that. Just thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much. and I really can't wait to make more videos on this series and just more videos in general. Thank you guys again, and I will see you next time.